this is your host, Julia Napini. I am a clinical and forensic social worker who owns a counseling practice and a consulting business. In this show, we discuss the challenges of being successful in business while maintaining your integrity and staying true to yourself. Join me while I interview other professionals and share insights from life and experience. Let's talk about RingRx, our latest sponsor. RingRx is a high-quality, HIPAA-compliant telephone, text, and fax communications platform. They provide seamless, cost-effective communications for behavioral therapists, medical practices, hospitals, and other healthcare providers. RingRx is designed for modern healthcare environments. They offer customizable features like a phone app, automated patient outreach, voicemail, after-hours call routing, and top-quality desk phones. Try RingRx for free today at ringrx.com. And if you sign up using the code CLIMB, you'll get 15% off your monthly bill forever. Conditions apply. Our guest today is someone that I have wanted on the show for a while, and we are finally making it happen today. I am thrilled. So this is someone who, along with her husband, has revolutionized the way that we are managing payroll in our practice, and she is also a group practice owner. So we've got plenty to talk about today. I would like to welcome Mandy Wannarka to the show. Hello.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here. So I would love to hear more about your journey into group practice ownership and then how Mindful Solutions came about.
Yeah. So I started out my mental health career as a social worker in a hospital setting and was pretty famously, like, people have quoted me back saying, like, you said you'd never do the private practice thing and all of that. And after a few years of doing it, which I miss it almost every day, I also did kind of want to do something different. And so I was ready to do that and make the leap, and not quite ready to understand all of the nitty gritty about what it means to hang your own shingle. So for a season, I was with a different group practice. And eventually, as it happens for a lot of folks, I think, in private practice settings, you sometimes will start kind of looking at the numbers and, wanting maybe some different balance in your life or things like that, and realized that I would have a different relationship to the money I was pulling in if I was the one that was, exclusively owning my own space and or owning the full owning of the work, having kind of the full awareness of all of that piece. Yeah. And so I, approached the practice owner I was with and said, I think it's kind of time for me to do that. And she was super supportive. So grateful for that launch that I had, support for that. And so I worked on hanging my own shingle. And for a short season, it was just me. I established my business and I was just happy to see clients. And that was it. Shortly before the pandemic hit, I was turning away so many people. My caseload was full, and it was hurting my heart to say no to so many people who had very real things they needed help and support with. And it was also a season where I felt like I had a little bit more in the tank, where I could think about and consider it being more than just me. And having had the experience of the group practice dynamic, where in an office building, there was kind of always a door open, you could knock on someone's door and get a quick consult. I missed some of those pieces. And so I decided to kind of dive in a little bit. And it was a little bit of one of those universe alignment pieces of things, because I had kind of softly made the decision, and then I encountered someone who was in a need of getting placed at an internship because something fell through. So my actual first start in kind of group practice world wasn't with an employee or staff member. It was with an intern, because I qualified as a supervisor. Okay. And after a few months of that, together, working out some of the nuance of just being in partnership with more than one person and everything, I started to very casually and slowly look for some people. And so we kind of very slowly added people, a lot of part-time folks who were just looking to kind of dabble in mental health work, outpatient mental health work. And, you fast forward into the pandemic, and, here we are on the other side in a lot of ways. And we're a group of 13 clinicians, again, various sides of like full-time, part-time. Some folks that have joined us are still in like internship kind of settings, which we really believe in. And we've, built out like a tiny little leadership team now because there's more work than just I can do. And then other folks who are just kind of leaning in as they are pursuing independent licensure or fully licensed. So nice, good mix of folks. We have a nice, big, beautiful space that we have grown into and are continuing to grow into. And as I was just kind of like chugging along at this whole group practice thing, there's hundreds of thousands of learning moments along the way. Um, Payroll being one that was very intimidating at first. It feels kind of like a trial by fire, but it's really important. Paying people and getting it right and all of that is just a monstrous task. It feels like it's very, very important, and
Right.
try to take it just very, very seriously. Some folks are relying on this as their only income, and so as I was navigating that, I took a lot of time. It's no secret that many therapists aren't like numbers minded. It's not like their front facing thing that they have a strength in. And so for me, it took a good chunk of time every time I was running payroll to get it right, to make sure I wasn't like transposing a number, copy pasting issues, just these like little things that could make a big difference in somebody's pay, or in the health of my business if I'm not getting it right the first time or having to make, corrections and adjustments. After I couldn't even say how long it was of seasons of doing that, my husband kind of like had cued in a little bit to how long it was taking me to run payroll. Hey, I'm going to do payroll. I'd disappear for a couple hours, like, are you done now? And, oh yeah, I think so. Or I got to get back to it. I need to take a break. And, he said, I might have some skills here that I could help with. So with all the appropriate checks and balances and that kind of thing, we started piloting how he could be of support. And his background is in, broadly is in information technology, but, a little bit more specifically is in developing coding, especially that, works to talk with spreadsheets and data and things like that. And so he began to help. I walked him basically through what I was doing, which was a lot of downloading the reports from the EHR that we used and then putting that on a spreadsheet and then filtering a lot of the data. A lot of the electronic health records these days give you like an abundance of data, like more than you need to give a particular clinician who needs to get paid. And so there was a lot of that kind of thing, deleting like $0 line items that nobody needs to see, filtering things out, applying people's compensation. And, when it was all said and done, like I said, it could be a 1 to 2 hour process, depending on all these little like nuances I needed to provide. So after watching me do that, he built out some coding, some things that he does regularly in his other line of work, and was able to really streamline my payroll process. So instead of me doing all that manual manipulation of the data, he was able to just allow me to upload it to a secure place and run his coding programming stuff and kick out a report for me that's really like clean, legible, easy to read, and most importantly, I think like void of a lot of the human error, the potential for human error that can exist and did actually happen to me, as a practice owner. So after we had done that a while, I had a colleague I'm in, professional connection with say, I think that this is something that other practice owners like you could benefit from. And we kind of talked about it together, and he's like, yeah, I mean, I have some capacity to support some other folks. Let's see if we can get some other people onboarded. And we started just kind of advertising in just like small pockets of communities that I am already a part of. And we gathered a handful of clients, and we've been doing it now for a little over a year. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's for a lot of folks, we were definitely saved, an hour, 2 hours. A few people, even as we were onboarding, we found different mathematical mistakes that they had been doing in their calculations. And so for some people, there was kind of like a cost savings on the front end.
Absolutely.
Of just kind of understanding like, oh, actually, this isn't the correct application of the data. The data that the EHR spits out is often reliable, but if you manipulate it in the wrong way, right, you get different answers. So providing clarity for people has been really important, but most importantly, as a practice owner, it's about like the time savings, in my opinion, because we
For
wear a
sure.
lot of hats and there isn't enough time in the day to tackle it all.
Well, God bless you both. And I can speak from my own experience of something that was taking me 10 plus hours a month, sometimes more. And that may not feel like a lot. But when you're not a numbers gal, it can feel like drudgery because
Hmm.
it is a task that you need to sit and focus. And there is the possibility for error. And we take this very seriously, and it's a big responsibility, and you don't want to make that mistake. And then as you grow, there's more and more people. And there's the, are you going to do the percentage model? And people have different percentages. And then you have to add in their benefits and their PTO. And did they attend a meeting? And there's the insurance reimbursement, but then there's also the copays and the deductibles. And so, yes, you guys have created something that really allows you to take that spreadsheet that we generate from our electronic health record and makes this beautiful form that is so easy for us to digest, and kind of add in a few little things and send it to the clinicians where it makes sense, and visibly it's beautiful. And so,
Hmm.
yeah, what a huge, huge time saver. So I'm curious how it is at this point with you kind of both tackling this, and then you have your practice and being a mom and a busy gal. How is it navigating two businesses at this point, now that it's more than a year in the making?
Yeah, I'd say that there's areas where we've found some rhythm and traction, and then there's areas where there's opportunities for improvement. It's been a while since we've kind of for a while. I think once we kind of got our initial customers kind of uploaded or onboarded, I should say, we kind of hit the pause button on doing anything other than just making sure that was going to work well. So we went through a season where we were able to um, and I'll come back to like the onboarding and like the newness of it, but we've kind of gone through these different iterations of the business and as a whole. So I think that that's a very normal thing. The juggling act that is running multiple businesses is definitely no small feat. And I don't know that like we're extraordinary. I mean, I know some folks who have 4 or 5 businesses and things like that, and I always look at them kind of like, what, so I know that there's just this wide spectrum of how people move through the world and what pulls their attention. For us, it's totally a labor of love, and it comes from this really like great place of just wanting to support other people the way I have been supported. But it does sometimes come at the cost of, like we get kids to bed and like, okay, we got to like look through those emails, or we've got to fix this issue, or things like that. And that is the reality of what we've signed up for. And largely that goes okay. Um, I'd say in the beginning, there were definitely more challenging parts of the first, just being, one of the questions I field often is like, what's it like to be in business with your partner? And it is technically his business, and I'm just kind of like providing like the clinical like lens. What we
Okay.
talk a lot about is that, his language, the literal language he uses for coding, and the lens with which he sees things is not the same way I do. And I
Right.
think in the beginning, there was a little bit of like entanglement and trying to figure out, because we were both just literally speaking 2 different languages. And so we would have like little like conflicts where, I would say, well, no, it can't look like that because, if I looked at that, that couldn't make any sense of it. Or he would say, that's not how the coding works, because I'd just be like, well, just make it look this way. And he'd be like, that's
Like it's easy.
literally not like, you cannot do it that way. So there was a lot of learning, I think, for both of us. And we learned a lot about the fact that we were speaking 2 different languages and how to work within that. And also when we just had to be like, okay, time out. Like I'm getting all fiery because I'm trying to tell you, and you're, and all of that. And, but we kind of, we made our way through that. And I think we now have a good rhythm of how to work with, whether it's current folks or a potential, to explain, where I kind of explain more of the clinical kind of aspects of things and try to translate that to the magic he does. And a lot of times that is what I say. I'll be like, it's like magic. I can't, he can give you all the specifics, but it'll probably land somewhere in the definition of magic, like it does for me. But he continues to flex into his own learning for different pieces and try to kind of refine things. And hey, I learned this cool thing. We could totally do that here. And so there's just little tweaks and stuff along the way too. So it's been, like I said, total labor of love and a little bit of like sacrifice along the way when we've got tiny humans and all of that in the mix. Um, but for the most part, it's been pretty pleasant and good to have like a new challenge and a new thing to think about.
I think that's a great way to look at it. And I appreciate you sharing what you did. I think that in a lot of ways, it's making me think of kind of sometimes how we work with clients that are experiencing those same struggles. So much of it comes down to communication. And you guys clearly had a strong mission and you had seen how this had been transformative for you and how it had been transformative for other people. You weren't going to let that get in the way. So it was like,
Hmm.
how do we not allow that to be a barrier? And so you kind of have your piece and he has his. And
Hmm.
yeah, I have a lot of respect for that. And being on the client end and kind of seeing how that works, it's really nice that you guys kind of each have your identified roles and you do your piece and you kind of know who to go to with which questions, and it's
Hmm.
enabled to continue on and help more people, which is
Hmm.
incredible. So I have to ask, the group practice piece is really fascinating to me too. So you were saying how you recently started having more of a leadership team. And I mean, I'm
Hmm.
sure that that's kind of a juggling act. I know how there have been kind of different seasons in my practice and we've gone through phases. You guys experienced a lot of growth. It can feel all consuming at
Hmm.
times. So to be able to balance that with this leadership is essential. Can you share
Hmm.
more on when that started and kind of
Hmm.
how you built that into your group practice?
Yeah, I participated in a 9-month course that was about kind of like stabilizing your business and scaling it a little bit. And so when I did that, I mean, I would say even being on I've been done with that for almost a year, and I'm still kind of returning to a lot of the concepts. So there were so many concepts jammed in. When I asked the creators of it, I kind of was like, you had to guess, right? Like how much content you've jammed into these 9 months. Like what would be the equivalent if you were just doing it at an ordinary play pace, you know? And I think their approximation was somewhere around, oh, this is probably like 3 to 5 years worth of work, you know, just jammed into this like
Oh, wow.
intensive kind of thing. Or maybe that's my approximation. I'm not exactly remembering, but I remember being like very much almost an overwhelm of like, these are all really amazing ideas, but how the heck am I supposed to do any of this, you know? So I started that, that would have been in like fall of 2022, carried me into like spring of 2023. And for that season, I actually proactively, like the summer prior, I ended up either like wrapping up my time with most of the clients I was seeing. At that point, I was seeing 20, 24 clients a week, or working on a warm transition to someone else who could continue their work, and almost exclusively dialed back to almost no clients to just give myself like room to breathe, room to process this new thing I was going to go through. And I think there's some privilege that I had in that, because obviously, or we are a family system who does need both incomes to live the life that we've established. And it wasn't, it wasn't just like I can stop generating revenue and be okay. Like I had to be having enough revenue coming in for the business itself to be able to make that leap. And I know that not everybody can do that. So I do recognize that I have some inherent privilege in being able to be in that season. And so I really tried to take that time to implement a lot of what was provided to us about structure. And what I really focused in on for practice growth purposes was really focused on like policies and procedures, things like in the handbook or operations manual that people were doing that we didn't really have written down. We
Okay.
tried to just get clarity a lot of places where there wasn't. One of the places that I didn't get as much traction while I was going through the program as I did in the kind of this latest season was probably around, metrics and dashboards and KPI, all these like things that are very relevant right now for folks to kind of measure the work we're doing. I would say, again, not being a numbers gal, I think there was kind of some stuff I had to wrestle with first about getting my brain to understand those concepts and the importance of them.
Mm-hmm.
But all in all, we made those changes, and in fall of last, or sorry, summer of last year, so just after I had finished this leadership kind of program, I started looking internally and considering, posting for folks who might be in a season of wanting to do maybe like a dual role, a hybrid of both clinical and leadership pieces. And so we started pretty small as myself and two other clinicians one who's independently licensed, one who just passed her exam today. Woo woo. So also now independently licensed, which is so great. Um,
That's wonderful.
and we just kind of created this kind of little core leadership piece. I didn't want it to be just two people. I wanted it to be at least three. And we started meeting most weeks. We certainly ebb and flow just like everybody with that. And, just to come together and have dialogues about what's left, where do we need to go? What buckets of focus do we need to bring to this organization? So things like, do we need to work on the accountability piece, which is metrics and data and all of that? Do we need to work on things related to the staff we have, staff engagement, retention, happiness, that piece. Do we just need more staff? Do we need to work more on the client facing pieces? And of course, when you first start, you end up with a list like 1,000
Oh,
pages long. And I think that was a little sobering, but we just kind of, leaned in. So we've been through all kinds of seasons of trying to set goals and revisit them. And, I'm really happy to say that I think we're really starting to kind of find some traction in that. I think for a while it was just the mechanics, figuring out how do you do this? How do you add somebody with just not just me, an opinion? How do you invite more opinions in? We've always been a really collaborative practice. I tell people even at our size that are considering an internship with us or when we are hiring, I tell people that I still really consider us to be quite new. And so that you have an opportunity to be part of our like establishing the culture versus, walking into a very well-oiled machine where you just have to kind of fit in. And,
yes.
I also recognize with a lot of people, like that's not for everybody. It is okay if you were like, I don't want the chaos that comes with some of that. And then I just let people know, like, then we're probably not the practice for you. We don't have it all figured out yet. But if you're ready to kind of show up and be a change maker, even within our organization, it might be a good fit.
I love that. There's so much of what you're sharing that I can relate to, and I really respect what you're doing in that realm of your life as well. And as much as I'm sure it was nice to have this leadership team, I can also imagine that that can be challenging for you to shift and have that responsibility shared for decision making and tasks. So, anything that you can say to how you adjusted to that?
I would say I'm probably still adjusting. It's not been a hard ask to have the people that I think when you have people in the right seats based on their skill set, based on what your values are of the practice and your individual values, and if there's alignment there, the discussions themselves are not like painful or difficult. There's alignment there, so there's kind of this inherent like, okay, I think we're on the same wavelength about a lot of things. I actually think the hardest piece for me about building out a leadership team has been that delegation, that piece of me that wants to have my hand in every single thing, and acknowledgement that stuff's not getting done when that happens. Mandy cannot have all of her hand in every single piece, and part concurrent with all of this has been getting diagnosed myself with ADHD and kind
Okay.
of understanding more about neurodivergence and kind of learning and unlearning so many pieces of that, and acknowledging that contributes to all of these pieces as well.
Right.
So it's been a good piece. I think the delegation piece is just really, really challenging, and thinking about, um, I try to, when we have things that need to be done, I think there's this idea of putting it out for everybody to kind of think about who's the best person for this instead of it just automatically falling on anyone. And then
Okay.
I think the last piece, if it's okay to share one more thing about it, is that in that process of learning to hand off, I think I got real good at that. But what might have been lost in some parts of our more recent seasons was just that myself also minding the edge of what other people's capacity is, right? Like if, even just because I am saying like I don't want to do this or I can't or I won't, is also still being mindful of the boundaries other people need for work-life balance. And I don't think we've ever there was never any explicit like, oh, Mandy needs me to do this and is forcing me or anything, but there was just this undercurrent of, well, it needs to get done. Someone's got to do it. I'll do it. And so we've recently just kind of had an awakening, even within our leadership team, of like, nope, I still want all of us to have balance. And so just because I'm saying this needs to get done, if it just has to sit on a shelf for a little bit, like that's okay too. We don't have to, there's no, I mean, this is an eternal thing we're kind of doing, right? There's always something to do. So we don't have to just barrel through as quickly as possible to get to the other side.
I appreciate that final piece so much. And I guess what I'm hearing are a couple of key things that seem to have been really helpful. And I'm wondering if you have any that you would add as far as you all going through these different phases and really being collaborative and being open to feedback, and the team really sharing with you their input and being willing to take on some things as well. So I think the first thing that you shared that was so huge is that you all being aware of that, you can then share that with people before they come on board so that they can be clear about whether or not this is the right fit, which
Mhm.
is so significant. But then it also sounds like that promotion of the leadership team and kind of knowing who's the go-to for what, delegating who has that responsibility. Sounds like you're also really respectful of each other's boundaries and maintaining balance. What are some other things that you have done through trial and error, it sounds like the majority of us, that
Mhm.
have really helped you all to be successful? And it sounds like you feel optimistic and hopeful and like things
Mhm.
are headed in the right direction, but they don't have to all be figured out. What are some other
Mhm.
components that have helped with
I think that one of the most helpful things that I did, kind of when I started to dive into sitting in the leadership seat more than anything else, was to get really clear on what I wanted the values of the practice to be anchored into. While a really challenging exercise sometimes to really get clear, I think that it was something that I can come back to now again and again when we have, the inevitable something come up that is a conflict, a trouble, something. We can come
that?
back to, is there alignment here with our values? Is that where, or is there misalignment? And is that where some of the angst is coming from? And it helps provide kind of like a direction when we sometimes feel directionless. So that was probably the number one task that, while very laborious and trying to, narrow down to just a handful, has really paid off as we've kind of moved forward. Hmm.
And what are the channels of communication? So I'm curious, what have you found to be the most effective? I'm sure you have your touch points. Are there ways for you guys to communicate in writing? Like, I'm just thinking for
Hmm.
me, I have touch points with everyone on my team at a minimum once a month. And it's really
Hmm.
checking in with them, not only in their work, but also them as a person and how we can support them and whatever their goals are. And so I'm thinking that just like with clients, not everybody is always going to be forthcoming when asked or necessarily even know or process
Hmm.
that quickly in the moment. So I found that surveys were really helpful to
Hmm.
get people to really sit and think and put it down on paper. What are those channels of communication for you all
Hmm.
as a team?
Yeah, so as a team, we have like more of like the daily kind of pieces or things like, Google Chat and things like that where we kind of remain connected. We have some folks who are completely offsite or virtual. And so it's been a nice way to foster or boost connection, especially when we know like some of us are going to come together on a semi-regular basis, but some of us won't ever be physically in the same space. So there's those kind of checkpoints. And the nice pieces about all those kind of chat pieces is you can build out different spaces, like organized by topic and things like that. So we have a robust kind of set of those kinds of pieces.
Nice.
For myself and the leadership team, as far as connection with our staff, we have built out some things that are at the very least influenced by some of the like the book Traction and EOS and this idea of trying to kind of standardize, how you do the work and people like everybody having an accountability number, pieces like that. So we've gone through different seasons, but we're kind of recently just renewed doing a monthly meeting, which is a half-hour checkpoint with me, almost exclusively focused on net numbers and metrics. So, things like your overall caseload as a clinician, and are you meeting the agreed upon piece of your employment? We also talk in that meeting about show rates and do some coaching about things like calendar management and, are you hitting the number? And sometimes the reason is like, well, you're not hitting the number because you are agreed upon this number of hours per week, but you have to plan for the fact that, the unexpected happens and people are canceling. So that meeting is very like structured, and that 30 minutes goes like by so fast, but it is still a touch point for everybody. And then one of my other members of leadership does something called what we call quarterly conversation, or authentic conversations is what we call them, but they're a quarterly touch point. She sends out a survey ahead of time just to get them thinking about different pieces. In that conversation, it's another, I believe, 30 minutes of time, but the focus is more on like the qualitative component of the work, right? Like, how are you doing as a clinician and as a human? Um, but it incorporates discussion about our reflection and discussion about our values. And, are you living those? Are you struggling with understanding them? Are there opportunities to lean in more with that? They talk about professional development, successes and challenges over the last quarter, as well as like looking ahead. So it's a really nice touch point to figure out how are people doing while doing like really hard work. And we've found those to be like they're very different meetings, the quantitative and the qualitative, but they both tackle different aspects of the business that we feel like is really important.
I love that. And how much are the clinicians preparing for the quarterly meetings? I'm thinking that that can be an extended period of time. Do you
Mhm.
have kind of a template that you follow? And is it really their
Yeah.
responsibility to have a lot of that prepared?
Yeah, our first iteration, we didn't really do as much prep as we realized kind of as we debriefed about it that there wasn't as enough structure for folks. And so the half hour was often kind of spent, and that's actually the same thing that happened with our monthly meetings, is it felt like we were spending so much time orienting somebody to the data, or in that case, like the reflection, that we didn't have time then to unpack either. And so what we did is we've now created a different way where folks can see their metrics in more real time, so that by the time they have the monthly meeting, there's no surprises. You can go as often as you'd like to see your numbers and everything, right? We're gonna unpack what that means. And similarly with the quarterly conversations, we are looking to folks they get a brief survey about a week beforehand, so they've scheduled, and then they do a survey that just is a reflection of those things that they will discuss. So they're asked to do a little bit of reflection ahead of time so that they can come prepared for a dialogue.
Oh, I love that. So, a couple of key points that I think are so important: the real time data, no surprises, but then also that opportunity to have some of those questions going into more of the qualitative meeting. Because, yeah, considering wins, I think in the moment when someone's asked, sometimes it can be really hard. So, if you
Mhm.
know what those questions are going to be and you can maybe jot some of those things down over those couple of months, then it's obviously going to be a lot more productive. But I see
Mhm.
such value in both different meetings with different focal points and so relevant. So it seems
Mhm.
like it's worked well for the team. Has it been an adjustment for all of them? What has their response been overall?
Yeah, I think, with the monthly meetings, I think we kind of found a rhythm in the beginning, and then I set it down for a little bit because I wasn't happy with not having the real-time data. And so as we're relaunching, I think it's a pretty I'd say it's kind of like a slow burn or a slow start to it. We're reorienting folks to it. And so I don't know if we have all of the feedback yet. I generally speaking, and I wouldn't even say it's coming directly from my team, but I just know I kind of am stealing myself as a practice owner, having seen other people implement things related to metrics and numbers that you can often get um, reactions that like you're going really corporate, or like, why do we need this? So I've been, I guess I would say, as a practice owner, really wrestling with, I mean, I feel like it's necessary when I think about, I have to like set the clinician part of me down, and I have to look at it more from the business perspective of, a business can only survive if it is profitable. And
Yeah.
to be profitable, we need people to do, the agreed upon work. And I try to use an example that I takes us way out of clinical. Like, if you are someone who works at a fast food restaurant, you probably have like deliverables or expectations to your job. Maybe you have to upsell certain amount of things, or, offer so many times to like make it a meal or whatever. And like that stuff is tracked, and people are held accountable. We can't be the exception. We can't, businesses can't exist, group practices can't exist if the exception is everybody, if everybody gets that. And I think a lot of times about when it was just me, because when it was just me, there was flexibility there, right? If I knew my numbers, I knew what my family needed and all the pieces, I could make a decision to be like, I don't want to call that insurance company and wait on the phone for 2 hours to chase them down about XYZ payment. That was a me decision. It didn't affect anybody else because I could know at the end of the day what my numbers were. When you choose to opt into a group practice, right, there are more components than just you. And so I do think that is also just a radical thing for some people to get clear on, is like group practice doesn't have to be for everybody. It is okay if you want to, be in a different season and do your work differently. But in here, we have to have these standards. So I think that from that perspective, the monthly meetings, the more quantitative, numbers focused, I'm stealing myself for that. But generally, we're just trying to be very kind and be like, hey, these are just the numbers. We're kind of information gathering and reorienting. This is no one's coming down and saying like this has to change tomorrow, right? Um,
Exactly. But awareness is the first step, and it's
mhm,
not something you ever want to find out very long after the fact, because then it's a lot harder to kind of hone in and what's going on here and provide that coaching and figure it out. And so it also, I'm sure, helps everyone really be in alignment and on the same page with what the expectations are, and to kind of have some skin in the game of the big picture
mhm,
that is practice. So we have touched upon so many things today that I feel are so relevant and I know will be of value to the listeners. I so appreciate it. You've given a lot of the real deal too. I think it's so important that we know that things are not always going to work. It's not always going to be flawless or perfect. And through trial and error, and like you said, different iterations, that's absolutely how it is the majority of the time from those practice owners that I hear from. But we don't necessarily talk about that piece as much as I think would be helpful to know that reality and that we can all relate to a lot of that. So I appreciate all that you guys are doing. So for those that are listening and payroll is a pain point, what is the best way to get in touch and potentially utilize these services?
Yeah, so we do have a very small social media presence. So if you were to go on to like Facebook, you would definitely find us. But we do have a website that we have, which is mindfulsolutionsmn.com. That is the best place to learn a little bit more about how we've structured our offerings and how to get in touch with us as well. We've got a contact form there. I would say that the biggest piece to know is that we're going to do our best to give you a consult to make sure that we understand, business structure and fees and all of that, and make sure that that's within our wheelhouse. We certainly love like some stretch assignments, but sometimes we've found if we don't do that, we just kind of jump in, that can be really jarring for everybody because we didn't quite understand the task at hand. And it's really important for us to make sure that we can deliver on something consistently and reliably, and give you guys, give folks like clean payroll reports. And so, there's learning there too as we go, and especially as we extend into different EHRs. We've seen a lot now, and so we know. I think in all of our work, we've only found one that we really couldn't get a report from that we could create something with. But for the most part, most of them those work, and we've done all kinds of fee structures. We've done percentage splits and fee for service, and all the little add-ons. Some folks have other income sources like Kajabi or stuff like that. Course, like they teach courses and income gets implemented. So we've got a lot of things we can do to support, but the biggest thing is to just kind of reach out and let us know that you're looking, and we're happy to, have that initial dialogue. Usually my husband and I try to hop on the same call because I'll run into something. I'm like, ooh, I don't know if that's something we can do or not. And then we kind of go from there with an estimate of, what the onboarding cost would be. There's a little bit of programming and stuff like that. So we work to get my husband paid for that time. And then usually within about 1 to 3 months, we get people onboarded. We kind of run things concurrently for a little bit, make sure everything is as good as we can make it. So there's try to mitigate any issues. And then we kind of, try to give you guys permission to be like, okay, hands off the wheel. I'm gonna see if this works. And for the most part, we're pretty happy with that rhythm.
It's so helpful to hear a little bit more about the process and the onboarding, because it's almost really speaking to that evolution, it sounds like, of this in addition to the practice, right? Where you really want to make sure that it's the right fit and that you're setting everyone up for success. And so it's almost like how I'm sure your hiring process has changed in time. The same thing with your onboarding for the payroll. And it is a really big deal and it is a huge responsibility. You want to make sure that the expectations are clear. So it sounds like you're always looking at things through that lens at this point. It sounds like that program was pretty transformative. So thank you so much for all that you guys do. I could not be more grateful to have been connected to the two of you, and hopefully other people after hearing will do the same. So I appreciate your time today and all you guys do.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. It was nice to be on.
If you like what you're hearing, please rate and review. This will help others find us and benefit as well. The Compassionate Climb podcast represents the opinions of Julia Napini and her guests. The information provided is intended for educational purposes only and should not be taken as legal advice. If that is what you are seeking, please consult an attorney.